Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates. It is 2020, and January, a lot of people thinking about what are their plans for this year, what do they want to accomplish, what are their goals. Maybe you've got New Year's resolutions. Those we talk about a lot. You probably see those on social media. How do you plan for the year? Do you set goals? Good question, and I'm ready to dig into it. Joining me today, my guest is Dr. Bernard Bull, president of Goddard College in Plainfield, Vermont. Dr. Bull, thanks for being my guest.
Good to be here.
You're a thinker, you're a Lutheran educator, and now serving in a position as president of Goddard College. So you get to work with faculty, students, and you have a lot on your plate, but yet you always seem to be pretty focused. How does goal setting play a role in your life? What role does goal setting play for you?
Well, I had to avoid, I almost had to laugh a little bit when you said focus, because I focus is the least, I just don't feel focused sometimes. I guess I do feel, I don't know, maybe in one way the word focus does work, is that there are some things I keep my eyes on, each year. And that is a big deal to me. So goals play a big role in my life. Let's see, how long ago was it? Well, I'm 48, turned 49 this year. And when I turned 40, I set 40 things I wanted to do 40 times in my 40s. And I actually finished those. So if you take that, that's, 40 times 40 in terms of the number of goals that I had. And they were less about, they were less about these kind of measurable goals all the time. They were more about developing habits of thinking and habits of how I relate with people in my life. Certainly sort of spiritual disciplines as well, habits that way. So I oftentimes use goals in my life to help me sort of prioritize where I spend my time and where I spend my energy. But I don't use them in the way that a lot of people think of them. And I have no problem setting unreasonable goals sometimes, even setting goals that I'm pretty confident I may miss, as long as they're not so overwhelming that I just lose motivation.
Okay, now you've opened a can of worms. Why set a goal if you know that it's not likely that you're going to hit it?
Well, because for me, it's more of a target. It's a direction. I use a goal as a way of orienting which direction I'm going to focus my time and my energy at some point. And there have been goals that I thought were unrealistic, that I thought I couldn't achieve, and I did. And there were goals that I thought I could achieve, and I didn't. And so sometimes I just don't trust. I mean, our frail human minds are sometimes limited, and God sometimes has plans that are different than what I might establish in a goal. And that's really important to me to use goals, but to hold on to them lightly. I think Corrie ten Boom talked about that sometimes at some point in one of her writings, where she said she learned to hold on to some things lightly because she had no idea what God had in store for her.
There are so many things that are that can consume our time, that are vying for our time, that want our time. And so I appreciate you pointing out that setting goals helps you focus on how you're going to use your time, where you're going to direct your attention, where you're going to focus your energy or your work. In your opinion, is it significant to our Christian vocations to set goals?
I think that goal setting, to me, as best as I can tell, and we certainly see the equivalent of a goal throughout history in terms of, and I'm no formal scholar of the history of Christianity, but in my own reading of early church fathers and others throughout history, there's certainly things that look like goals. But they might not have used the language of the modern goal. Like today, people have these very formal processes of what is a SMART goal, and is it measurable and achievable, and all of those kinds of things. So I certainly would not want to impose some kind of legalistic rule saying that goals are necessary to embrace the Christian life today, at least not in the way that they're framed today. But I think more generally speaking, the idea of having a focus and devoting our time and energy to some things and not others. You don't be conformed to the patterns of the world. Be transformed by the renewing of your minds, and you'll be able to test and approve God's will. That seems to be a passage about focus. Or in Philippians, it talks about consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, and this idea of the role of joy and where we put it as a focus in our lives. I mean, there certainly seems to be reference to goal setting in Scripture. And I think the other piece is, as we think about vocation, and vocation is an acknowledgement that we each have these distinct callings from God as father and husband and citizen, and for me right now, a college administrator and teacher, that I do believe that sometimes some formal goal setting can help me avoid the temptation to be distracted and drawn beyond my vocation or outside of my vocation. Of course, acknowledging that vocations can be emergent. There may be new callings that God has for me that I haven't seen or recognized yet.
So how do you approach goal setting for yourself? Can you give us an example?
So I do establish some goals. Like I write a lot, and I will have certain goals I want to finish this book this year. And for me, I'm usually trying to write or research. I'm always working on 2 to 3 books at any given time, and some of them will take me 6 months, and will take me 6 years to finish. So I do have sort of formal tasks. And I know that a lot of people break things up into different categories. I do tend to have something that I set that has to do with my family priorities, one that has to do with my relationship with God, and I pick one that has to do with my sort of professional goals, and I usually have something about health in there. So I do pick some different goals like that each year. For me, but again, it's more about habits for me. This year I'm trying something a little bit different. Every year I have one thing that I do. Instead of formal goals, I choose 3 words to focus my efforts. And so last year, for example, even if there's not a formal goal, I just choose these words. I study them. I learn about them. I read books about them. I try to create habits and little experiments for myself around those words. And last year I chose the word wonder, gratitude, and impact. And so by choosing those, part of wonder, what I ended up doing last year was going through Scripture and looking at examples of wonder throughout the Bible. I also read a number of books about the research and the psychology and philosophy of wonder. And then I also tried to create little habits for me to pause and just be grateful for the things around me and realize that, the Psalms are a wonderful place to introduce us to wonder. And they point us to, God's gift in the natural world and so many moments of wonder, but also the wonder of God at work in our lives and the gifts he's granted other people and how they're expressed in their vocations. It was an incredible year last year for me, and it was one of the most difficult professional years of my life. But by choosing this word wonder, it was really really revitalizing. And gratitude was a similar one, even in difficult times. I did a Bible study on gratitude last year because I chose that word, read some books on gratitude and thankfulness, and then tried to create some little activities for myself to practice in. And by the way, my 3 words for this year, I'm so focused on the past, my 3 words for this year are play, give, and believe.
Interesting. Now I'm curious to see as that unfolds what books end up on the reading list this year, and that'll be interesting. So do you share much about your goals with anyone intentionally or unintentionally? Do you share those goals and discuss them with anyone, or is it pretty much a private thing and for the most part keep it to yourself?
No, I make it pretty public. In fact, I have a blog that I write my musings about life in the world, especially education and the like. And every year, right before the new year, I post my 3-word. I do a postmortem on my 3 words from the prior year, and I give people a description of what my 3 words are for the forthcoming year, and often will include some of the more tangible goals that fit within those words as well. So I make it very public in my failures or shortcomings and maybe mild successes here and there. All of those are pretty public to my entire following. And I have at least 100,000 people or more who who see my goals.
So what you mentioned before, sometimes you set goals that you don't think you'll achieve, and some that and you've surprised yourself and achieved them, and some that you thought you would and didn't. What do you think? What are you setting for this year that you think is maybe a bit further than what you can accomplish?
Well, some of them are professional, specifically to the organization that I'm working at. That I took this job. I've been in Lutheran education for years, and I stepped out of the Lutheran education system to learn and grow and stretch myself in a new way. I stepped into a college that was put on probation at risk of closing, declining enrollment for 7 years in a row. And so we have a massive fundraising campaign and other things like that are part of a very tangible professional goals that some might look at it and think, wow, is that achievable or not? And I think that was actually similar to the work last year. We didn't know if we were going to exist this year. So definitely some of those professionally, but also I always I think others can learn from my mistakes maybe on this, is I always stretch myself a little bit too far. I always have these kind of avocational goals that are usually about writing, because most of my writing I do at night and early morning and weekends. It's not part of my regular full-time job. And so I have goals for writing and publishing 3 books in 2020. And I've finished 2 books completely in 1 year, but I've never finished 3 full books in a year.
That is a noble task, nonetheless. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on goal setting. Dr. Bernard Bull, president of Goddard College, Plainfield, Vermont. Thanks for being my guest on the Coffee Hour today.
Great. It's great to be here.
That was a lot of fun. I'm Andy Bates.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.